Crime and punishment. Step by step, we're moving forward to another important vocabulary section. Crime and punishment. Let's start with the word crime. Its definition is simple: an act against the law. But it can have many different meanings when used in expressions. So let's have a closer look at some of them. Petty crime. Not a serious crime. Violent crime. Crime which includes assault. Organized crime. Organized group of people commits crimes or engages in criminal enterprises for profit. White-collar crime. A term mostly referring to business world crimes, usually crimes committed by businessmen or office workers for financial gain. Victimless crime. A crime with no apparent victim. Let's go through some examples. He has a history of violent crime stretching back to his early years. Bribery is a popular type of white-collar crime. In case of victimless crimes, prosecution starts within 1 week. Now, let's work with some other useful phrases. If you don't know any of them, look them up in the dictionary and write them in your notepad for future reference. To carry out a crime. To investigate a crime. To fight crime. To commit a crime. To prevent crime. A crackdown on crime. Life of crime. Crime and disorder. A crime wave. Circumstances of the crime. The incidents of crime. There are dozens of expressions with the word crime. Now, let's move forward and discuss the types of crime. A popular word in action movies is abduction. It's an act of capturing, carrying away by force. Example: there has been a series of abductions in the area. Arson is an act of criminal burning of property. Example: it looked like an accidental fire, not arson. Assault. A violent physical attack. Example: his body showed signs of assault. Burglary. Illegal entrance into premises with criminal intent. Example: they said there was a burglary, but nothing was missing. Child abuse. Physical or emotional mistreatment of a child. Example: in the United States, the laws defining what constitutes child abuse vary from state to state. Drug trafficking. Production, distribution, and sale of illegal drugs. Example: the key source of profit of organized crime groups is drug trafficking. Fraud. If you are promised $1 million on the internet, it's fraud. Fraud is trickery intended to gain an advantage. Example: she was found guilty of committing fraud. Hacking. Special type of internet crime. When somebody's website or server is hacked, it means that the server or website is broken into. Hijacking. Stopping and stealing a vehicle. Example: he hijacked a truck, threatening the driver with a gun. Murder. The crime of deliberately killing a person. Example: her husband was found murdered. Manslaughter. Also killing a person, but accidentally, without the intent to do so. Example: he was back in prison 2 years later, convicted of manslaughter. Terrorism. Violence or threat of violence as a way of trying to achieve a political goal. Example: international action to combat terrorism should focus heavily on prevention. Blackmailing. using secret information to get something in return, usually money. Example: the former Romanian Prime Minister was placed on probation for blackmail. Felony: a serious crime such as murder or burglary. Example: filing false tax returns is a felony. Pickpocketing: stealing someone's belongings from pockets and purses. Example: any tourist city is a haven for pickpockets and thieves. Shoplifting: stealing things from a store or shop. Example: a boy shoplifted a toy from the store. And the last word combination is traffic offenses. Crimes committed on the road. When committing a traffic offense, people usually have to pay a fine. Example: in European countries, fines for traffic offenses are extremely high. Another big part of the crime and punishment vocabulary is court vocabulary. A defendant: a person accused of a crime in court. Example: the defendant was convicted of murder. A prosecutor: the lawyer who represents the side that tries to prove the person guilty. Example: the public prosecutor finally decided not to pursue charges. A witness: a person who sees something, such as a crime, happening. Example: the defense called its first witness. Guilty: responsible for committing a crime or doing something wrong. Example: the jury found him guilty of murder. Victim: a person who has been attacked in some way by somebody. Example: some victims are selected because they seem vulnerable. And here we have some useful expressions with the word victim. Innocent victim. Unsuspecting victim. To portray somebody as a victim. A suspect: a person who is believed to be guilty. Example: the man was arrested as a suspect. An attorney: a lawyer who can sue or defend people. Example: if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you by the state. Evidence: something that can serve to prove something. In our context, evidence is usually presented in court to prove that someone is guilty or innocent. Popular expressions with the word evidence are hearsay evidence, criminal evidence, in the light of evidence, or in the face of evidence, not a scrap of evidence. Verdict: the decision made by a jury in a trial. Example: the jury reached a verdict after hours of deliberation. And here is a list of verdict expressions. Favorable verdict. Adverse verdict. To appeal against a verdict. Final verdict. A judge: a public official given the right to decide on questions brought before a court of justice. Example: the judge ordered the company to pay compensation. The following expressions are also widely used. A panel of independent judges. High court judge. Federal judge. Jury: a group of people that decides on a court case. Example: tell the jury in your own words what happened. Expressions: trial by jury. To serve on a jury. Penalties. Now let's talk about possible penalties, or the types of punishment and words and phrases to describe them. Death penalty, also known as capital punishment, is the execution of a person after judgment by a legal system. Example: Our criminal system is very careful in cases of death penalty. Suspended sentence. The judge's decision to delay a prison or jail sentence. Example: a suspended sentence usually remains on the defendant's criminal record permanently. Forfeiture. The loss of property or money because of legal obligation or as a judge's decision. Example: the court may also order forfeiture of property in this case. Probation. A period of time in which a person who has committed a crime is allowed to stay out of prison if that person behaves well. Example: she was put on probation for 3 years. To suspend a license usually refers to a driver's license and means that your license is taken away for a period of time. Example: if you are ticketed for too many violations within a specific period of time, your license will be suspended. Corporal punishment. Physical punishment. Example: corporal punishment of some form is still used in schools in some states. Prison sentence or custodial sentence or imprisonment. These terms are almost similar in meaning and thus could serve to paraphrase. They all describe a situation when someone is convicted and sent to spend a specified period of time in prison. Example: a court can give a range of prison sentences including suspended, fixed term, and life sentences. A ban. Sometimes a jury can impose a ban, which means that you are prohibited from doing something. Example: he was banned from entering the building. A fine. An amount of money an offender must pay. Example: a fine can be given instead of or in addition to imprisonment. Community service. Sometimes a jury can decide to send a guilty person to perform some community service. Community service refers to unpaid work beneficial for the community. Example: alternative sentences can include different combinations of the following: a suspended sentence, probation, and community service. And here are some other useful words and phrases. Serial criminal. A criminal involved in a number of crimes. To deter. Prevention. To rehabilitate. Law-abiding. Antisocial behavior. Juvenile delinquency. That's basically all for crime and punishment vocabulary. It might seem to be too difficult to memorize all of them in one day, but you don't have to. Take your time. Memorize basic vocabulary and remember to use them in your writing and other parts of the IELTS examination. Good luck!